Suicide is a tough topic, but the Washington County Reach for Hope Suicide Prevention Coalition wants you to know that there is always hope. We are a caring community reaching out to provide compassion and hope for a community free of suicide. In the next half hour, we'll talk with community partners to identify risk factors, raise awareness, and discuss prevention strategies. Hi, I'm Melissa Anderson. Welcome to another edition of Reach for Hope, where there's always hope. You know, while much of our focus is on prevention of suicide, we also must face the reality of suicide loss. And with me today is Marylynn Goudy, who lost her husband Jordan to suicide 5 years ago in Washington County. Welcome. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you, Melissa.
I appreciate that you're here to talk about your experience, but I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you for doing this and you know, being able to open up and share with others who might have had the same issues in the past. And now, give us some background about your lives together as a family with Jordan and before your loss.
Okay. So Jordan and I met at Utah State University. We were both students there, and I had some friends who knew his older brother, and so when I heard his name, it was the, hey, do you know kind of thing. And so we just started talking. We studied together, and then we ended up falling in love and getting married. We finished school at Utah State, and then we moved to Japan for a couple of years, taught English there. We took our little girl with us there. Then we actually moved back here. We lived in St. George for about 10 years, and then moved away, and I had a little boy here, and then moved to Texas, and now we're back. So
you've been here for how many years then, the second time around?
A second time around, we moved here in 2017, so that's 6 years.
Yeah. So you have two kids, it sounds like. Tell me a little bit about your family. And I'm looking at these pictures that we have been looking at. You're very happy looking.
Yeah.
Big smiles on their faces. When were those pictures taken?
Most of them were taken just 2 weeks before my husband died. So looking at him, you wouldn't expect that was what was going on in his mind. But he had struggled with some depression most of the time we were together. I felt like I didn't know about it for a couple of years, but I think he just kept it hidden pretty well. But he, and after he died, people was like, I would never have thought that of him. He was always so happy, and he was. But he hid it really well. He just didn't deal with it. So.
What kinds of things then did you guys, to back up just a hair, did you have in common that really made you click?
Well, we had a really similar family situation, and that's a whole nother chapter. But I think we both loved to travel. We both loved adventure. He worked for an airline eventually, and so we got to travel all over, take our kids, and we had some really fun adventures together, and just really enjoyed being together. We hiked, anything outside, anything on the water. We've always just loved that.
Yeah, and I see a picture up there with you with an airplane. Was he a pilot as well, or did he just like to fly?
Well, so he wanted to be a pilot. That was before we had kids. We had I gave him a Christmas present of a flying lessons, and so he went up and we went up together. That was a really fun day, and he did end up getting his private pilot license, but he just felt like, unless you're in the military or something, it was really expensive to get a pilot's license. And so he just had the private. He didn't ever fly commercially. He worked as a dispatcher for a couple different airlines. And so it was good. We got the benefits, and he liked to do airplanes, but, it was a great life.
Yeah. Now tell me what you do.
Well, I'm a teacher. I used to teach here at Dixie, and when I was at Dixie, and I taught at SUU for a little bit as an adjunct, but now I teach at Pineview Middle School, special ed.
And how do you like that?
It depends on the day. I for the most part love it. There are hard times with everything, but yeah, it's gotten harder through the years. I see, and I think that's something that kind of leads into what we're talking about with suicide. That life is harder. Kids are having a harder time. Everyone's having a harder time, and so that makes my job a little harder too. So
yeah. So you've lived this.
I've lived it, and I'm still living it.
Yeah. Take us back then to 2018. Okay. When you discovered that Jordan was apparently missing.
Yeah, so we'd had a bit of a fight in the morning, and he left, and I knew he was gone, and so I kept trying to call him through the day, and because I was at school, and he wasn't. I went home at lunch to check; he wasn't home yet, and I thought he just needs a little time to calm down, and. Anyway, so when I got done with school, I went to the police office and I talked to the police and reported him missing. And I said, I know it hasn't been 24 hours. And they said, no, we want to know right away. And So I saw them out in the neighborhood talking to people and kind of driving around and stuff. And he didn't come home that night. And so the next day, I mean, I didn't know what to do. 'Cause, I told the police, what else do you do? So I posted on Facebook, of course. That's so 2018. But anyway, I posted that he was missing. And so some friends of mine made a flyer and hung it up. And our neighborhood organized a big search and rescue. And then the actual official search and rescue people came out. And he was found really pretty quickly within an hour and a half. So he was at Sullivan Park.
And he had taken his own life.
Yeah.
Did you have any, you said earlier that he was struggling with depression. Tell me a little bit about that, what that could have been caused by, or you said you got into a little bit of fight, but I don't think that, couples fight all the time.
Yeah.
So it
wasn't that. So it's hard to say really. I mean, I think that there was a lot going on at work. He had some things going on at work. He was a Southwest and he loved his job, but there was it's a long story. Another company was merging with them and there was a lot of politics going on and it was a lot of heated conversations. And then our daughter moved away from home. She went to college and I think he really missed her. And I think it was like the stress of change and things. And so I think there were just a lot of things, but I think it just got to be so much. And so he suddenly quit his job. He called me and said, I just quit. And so that was a big, the beginning
red flag.
The beginning of a downward spiral. And I would say his personality changed a lot after that.
Yeah. So did he ever reach out then for help between that time and the time he took his life?
He did. He was going to a therapist, and that was really what our argument was about. He felt guilty for quitting his job, and then I was supporting us for a little while because, he was 50, and it's hard to find a job, and he'd been in such a niche position for so long. It's hard. You would be starting all over, and the aviation industry is a small world, so it just wasn't. He wasn't finding anything. So I was working to support us, and so he felt like he couldn't spend any money. He just felt like he didn't deserve it. Maybe he had blown it, and we'd sold our house in Texas. We had some money. Money was not the issue that he made it to be, but
in his mind,
yeah,
he was going through a midlife crisis.
He was.
I mean, he didn't know what to do,
right?
And that's tough when you struggle. So
he had a prescription, and he wouldn't get it refilled. He didn't want to spend the money on that. He didn't want to spend the money on a therapist, so he was going once a month. It was a tough time.
Yeah, and I imagine that was really tough when you and your children found out about it, because those pictures were just, he was so happy looking. It's hard to see that smile on all of your faces and then have it go awry.
Like I said, that was 2 weeks before he died. I mean, I'm not saying everything changed in 2 weeks. I'm just saying he covered it really well, that things weren't okay for a long time.
And oftentimes that's what people do. They want to put a smile on their face to try to hide what's really going on inside, which is why it's important for us to ask that question. Right. How are you really doing? Because they might just say, fine, I'm okay, whatever, shove it under the carpet.
And really, I feel like, maybe this is off topic, but I feel like that's part of the reason we're here is we need to develop more forms of talking about things, because when someone asks, honestly, right now, I sometimes say, I don't really know how to answer that, because am I going to take my life? No. Am I generally okay? Fine. But am I good? No, I'm not good. I'm okay.
Everybody struggles, and it's okay to not be okay sometimes. We just have to know when to put that boundary up and saying, okay, now maybe I do need some help, or I need to talk to somebody at least.
And I think if someone says, I'm not really doing okay, how do you respond to that? We need to figure out how to respond to that. You say, is there something I can do to help you? Is there someone do you have someone to talk to if it's not me? We have to find ways to be comfortable with that conversation.
I totally agree with that.
I wasn't.
Yeah. Well, and how do you know until it's in your face, So what have you done then as a survivor of loss to overcome this?
Cried a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Right after he died, I was teaching, but I didn't have my license. I was doing the ARL program.
Okay.
And so because I had a master's degree, but I didn't have a teaching license, which was kind of weird. So, so I compartmentalized it, and I worked really hard. I took 10 classes that summer. He died in May, and that summer, my younger boy went up to stay with some cousins for a couple of weeks, and I just took 10 classes that summer. It was 28 credits, and I just dove in and did it all in one summer. And so that was one thing, keeping busy, but for sure therapy. All three of us have had therapy at different times, and none of us are currently, maybe one of us is currently in therapy right now, but that's been something that we go out and in as we need to, and I'm very supportive and encouraging of my kids getting the help that they need, and of me getting the help that I need, and that's been really helpful. But you have to find the right therapist. I think when people say therapy doesn't work for me, it's often because they just haven't found the right person.
Or they're not ready to open up.
Yeah.
Because you really do have to open up.
Yes. And that's my daughter wasn't ready at first. So she had a couple of sessions and then she said, I don't want to do this. And I said, okay, if you change your mind, let me know. And she did. And so she is seeing someone now. But yeah, she didn't need it at the time.
Yeah. So did you look for any like support groups or counseling outside of the therapy?
Yeah. So, and this is outdated information maybe. Right after Jordan died, I went to one group and they were great. I would love to have gone back. But the problem was there was nothing for children. There's no grieving support. And I talked to them about it and they were like, we don't really know. And then I thought I heard of a group and then we went to it. No one was there. So it's been kind of a challenge because he was young enough that I didn't want to leave him at home at the time. Now I look for ways to leave him. Just kidding. But anyway, there wasn't anything for him at that age. And so he saw his therapist, but that was it. There was no like youth support. And I thought that would have been so helpful for him. And if I hadn't been, we had no life insurance or anything, so because he wasn't working. And anyway, so I've had to work 1 or 2 jobs to make ends meet. And so I haven't had the time or the energy or the brain power or the coping skills to set anything up like that. But if there's anyone who's looking for something that needs to happen, set up a support system for kids who are grieving suicide. Yeah.
That's a great idea because we hear about it all the time for adults, but I think kids think about things differently than we do too as well.
Sure.
You can approach them differently and they need a little bit different approach.
Well, yeah, and I think for them the social component is so much bigger because when Jordan died, like people were reaching out to me left and right. When for my son, it wasn't like that. They were kids didn't know what to say, and so when he was acting out, and I don't think the teachers knew what to say either, because if he was doing something in class, I'd think, oh, that's trauma. He's showing trauma, and the teacher's like, no, he's just misbehaving, and I'm like, oh, do you know what happened? And they're like, oh. So I just think kids need so much more support than they're getting. I just see that as a huge problem because as the numbers of suicide rise, the numbers of people affected is getting younger, I think. I'm not an expert. Getting
left behind is not good. And we need a peer-to-peer group. Maybe something we might think about starting.
Yeah, there you go.
What would you say to others then who may be experiencing losses and having a tough time getting through this?
Really, you're not alone. And that's, I'm not an expert. I haven't done any research. I haven't done any studying. I've lived it, and I just know my experience. But the more I talk about it and share my experience, the more I hear from other people. I have heard some really just tragic stories, and I don't think of mine as a tragedy as much as some of the ones I've heard, but there's no good suicide stories, but just know that you're not alone, that there are people who care, and that I had a conversation with a friend the other day who was saying, people are afraid to say, hey, it's the holidays, are you thinking of your son or your brother or your husband, whatever, and do you need to talk or anything? And my friend said, I think they're afraid that they're reminding us of something painful. We don't need to be reminded. We know. We miss them all the time. And this friend of mine who lost a son, not to suicide, but to COVID actually, she said, he's still here with me, and I want to talk about. I want him to be part of my Christmas celebration. I want him to be part of my life, but it's hard for other people when I talk about him. And that made me feel bad for her because, well, we talked about this too. Like when someone dies, you're not just losing your past, you're losing your future. And that's worse, I think, because mourning the past, it happened and nothing can change that. But now suddenly my grandkids won't know their grandfather. My future has changed because of this. So I mourn my future more than I do my past. And I need people to talk to about that because it's right now and in the future that loss is taking place.
Right.
So
maybe bring up those pictures of him with a smile on his face and say, this is the things he liked to do. Yeah. This is what he did.
Mm-hmm. And just say, hey, his birthday's coming up. Hey, I'm thinking about Jordan. Hope you're doing something special to celebrate or commemorate, or, just talk about him. It's not going to hurt our feelings. We already know.
Yeah, you've already been there. You've already lived that. Yeah. So it's lived experience.
I might cry. And if so, that's okay.
It's okay. It is. That's true. So it's important, like you said, to talk about your loss, even as much as difficult as it may be.
Yeah. Some days easier than others, for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. So what do you think about, as a community, what we might do better to help recognize the signs of suicide and help in the prevention of suicide as a whole? I mean, you said there was some depression there, but did you really think that he was going to go take his life?
Never.
I mean, it just maybe didn't even occur to you?
No. And I don't think there were any signs with him. I mean, I guess, quitting his job and things, in hindsight probably, but it was spread out over 2 years. It wasn't like he quit his job and died the next day. It was over 2 years. And so, people get depressed. People have hard times. People go through cycles. So I don't know about signs. And like I said, I'm not an expert, but as a community, I think it's less about specifically suicide and more about like connecting with each other and being authentic and being real. Sometimes we think we're not going to measure up to what we see our neighbors doing on Facebook or social media, whatever. And we shouldn't even try. We should just put our authentic self out there, good and bad, and be real with each other. Because, I mean, and I've gotten really good about that with my house lately. I keep lowering my expectations and I don't care anymore what it looks like. But everyone has something that they feel like they're not doing very well, so they want to hide it. And I just thought that impedes connection. And connection is kind of the alternative that we want. If we don't have connection, that's where suicide comes in.
Right. And so it sounds like there was a culmination of things that just happened over time. And because he didn't deal with it, in the proper way, it built up. Yeah. So we need to talk about things when things are starting to happen and break down, especially as couples, feel more open to share our feelings and say, hey, I'm not doing so good. What can we do about this? But I think men in particular, and I'm not trying to be, I think they have a harder time opening up with their feelings than women do. I think women will blab it all over the place, put it on Facebook, talk to their friends. They get it out, but men kind of hold that in.
In fact, Teresa Willie, who we were talking about earlier, who's Southwest Behavioral Health, was my neighbor when this happened. She came over and talked to me and my kids about suicide and a bunch of different things. She was so helpful. But she said that's the growing demographic is middle-aged men for suicide, because I think there's these transitions and these things that they aren't prepared to handle. They don't know how to deal with them. They don't know how to ask for help, maybe. And I don't know. That's what some of the research said at that time.
Yeah, and they're more likely to, for a lack of better words, succeed in their mission of taking their own lives. Yeah. So as a school teacher, then, what do you do to encourage youth that you said you're special ed to try to keep them from maybe thinking about that, because they probably have some pretty difficulties not fitting in?
So I thought about this a little. I think there's two main things that I have tried to do and that maybe, I can share that might be helpful. I think the first thing is, preparing kids to deal with failure, because you're not always going to succeed and there's going to be hard times and you can't protect your child from all the consequences. You have to say, you know what, it didn't work out this time and that's okay. We'll fix it. We'll find another way. We'll do something else. So they have to have some coping strategies when things go bad. And that can be, very simple things. If you didn't pass the math test and you teach it, then the parents shouldn't come in and say, help my student. The student should say, how can I improve my grade? What can I do to bring my grade up? I tell my son that all the time, talk to your teachers. And so I think that's one thing, is help kids find coping strategies when things go wrong. And then the second thing, kind of mentioned, connection. I spend a lot of time. So the kids that I work with aren't the life skills, the ones that, can't function very well. This used to be called like resource room when I was in school, where you just need a little extra help. So you'd go in and work for a little while. And so we try to do a lot of like social skills things. I try to get them interacting with each other as much as possible. Like I'll work with a group and ask them questions together, or we'll get out Uno and play a game together. I just want them to find ways to talk, and I try to model that. I model how you can tease a little bit, but make sure they know you're teasing, and just like interact with people. That connection is so important, and kids need it so badly. So that's what I think is surviving hard times, finding ways to cope with failure, and connecting with other people, being real.
Yeah, and building up that resilience, and with, like you said, with those coping skills, to know what to do. Take a deep breath, go for a walk. Know that it's not the end of the world if you got a bad grade on a test, or know that if someone rejects you or turns you down, or you didn't get that date you thought you might get, that tomorrow's another day.
Right.
And
nothing lasts forever.
Nothing is worth that.
For sure.
But I think the whole point of the matter is reaching out too as well, and not being afraid to make that connection and say, hey, I'm not okay.
Yeah. And then being able to have that conversation that, what do you need to be okay? What can we do to help you? That you're not alone. I'm in this with you, even though I don't feel it with you. I'm your friend and I love you and I'm supporting you in it.
Yeah. So what are you doing then today after this? It's been tough, I'm sure, that to try to start over. You guys were married for what, 20 some years?
23 years. Yeah. Yeah.
And how have you kind of moved on, or have you?
Oh gosh. I mean, I've been trying to, I had to work. That's what I do. I work and I take care of my kids. That's kind of my life. But I am involved in there's a conference that's coming up next month. It's a widowers conference of Southern Utah. It's not just suicide, but it's for anyone who's lost a partner. And so there's that. I'm involved with, I work 2 jobs, and so that's a lot. And that's kind of all I've got time for. I try to work out and get some endorphins that way, and read and travel still. Those are the things I like to do.
And what do you do to make yourself, what do you do for yourself? You said travel and read.
Yeah.
Is there something else that you're putting on your bucket list, or thinking about, that you're working for your own goals? Because you're a mother, you're single, and you're trying to do all of these things, and you're the caretaker, and you're taking care of everybody else. But what are you doing for you?
Not really much of anything. I mean, I honestly take a long hot bubble bath sometimes. I go lay out in the hammock in the backyard. I'll go for a walk or a bike ride or a drive sometimes by myself. But honestly, my joy is being with my kids. I really love having my kids around. I need some time from them sometimes, but I love it when my daughter comes over on Sunday. She has an apartment in town, so she'll come over for dinner, and that's a big deal for me. It's a big deal for me to have them all together, and my husband's birthday would be the 17th coming up, and so we always try and talk about him and commemorate the occasion. Sometimes we'll have pie and ice cream, or cake. He like both those, but it's close to Christmas, so we don't need any more sugar. We mostly just talk about him.
But sharing those experiences, the happy times, is important to remember. Yeah. And sometimes the holidays can be a struggle for a lot of people. But it sounds to me like you've dealt with that with your children long enough to where they're kind of going, we miss Dad, but at the same time, we know it's okay. Yeah,
we just keep going, and sometimes things do need to stop. Sometimes one of us is having a hard enough time that we just say, okay, we're going to call it a day and just hunker down in self-care mode. Stay home and talk and not worry about anything else. But that's pretty rare. We're pretty bouncy, resilient people.
Yeah, I like the idea of the cake and ice cream, because sugar always does help me through everything. What final words would you like to share with our viewers out there about being resilient and being even good listeners?
Well, I don't know if this is a thing, but I would say one thing is that just to remember that nothing is permanent. Like I said, if you're having a bad day today, tomorrow's going to be better. Last summer, my son and I went on a trip, and we spent 23 days, and we were in 8 countries, and we did all these things. I thought, Jordan would have loved this. If he had survived, if he had stayed alive, we would have done this together, and he would have loved it. So there's more good things in the future than there are bad. I totally believe that. So just hold on for the next good thing, and realize that bad things are temporary. They're just not going to last. You just got to hold on, and if it seems like forever, then you get the help that you need, and find something to live for.
Find that joy that you talked about, that happiness inside your heart and your spirit, and hang on to that.
There's something. Everyone has someone that loves them and cares about them. Sometimes you don't. It's not who you think it is. You just gotta find someone that loves you and cares about you, and hold on.
All right.
There's good things.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you so much for your time and sharing your experiences and talking to us about this, because it's really important to know that there might be other people out there that are going through the same thing. So thank you so much.
Thank you for asking, Melissa. I enjoyed talking with you.
Right. It's just enlightening to hear how you've coped and how your children are coping as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks to our audience for taking time to listen, as well as to others out there who may be, needing some help. And remember that there's always the number of 988 you can call for reaching out for help. And that's what we're here to do too, is to give you hope for the future, because that's what this is all about. We're all in this life together, and it may not be easy, but we're here. So, and we love you. All right. Thanks for watching, and share this story with others. Thanks. The Reach for Hope Coalition wants you to know that we care about you and we are here to help. If you or someone you know is thinking about suicide, reach out. You're not alone. To access resources for yourself or others, visit our webpage at reachforhopeutah.org. That's reach4hopeutah.org. If you are experiencing a crisis, please call or text the Suicide Crisis Lifeline at 988, because you matter and there is always hope.
This has been a production from a podcast studio.